In 1715, deep in the snowy forests of Russian Karelia, master builder Dmitry Volkov faced a problem that had choked Arctic homes for centuries. The old Savupirti smokehouses trapped heat, but they trapped smoke too, filling rooms with soot, stinging eyes, and sickening entire families. Dmitri knew there had to be a better way, and after witnessing a newborn suffocate in a poorly vented home, he made it his life's mission to design a chimney that could clear smoke flawlessly, even in brutal northern winters. For 10 relentless years he experimented, taller flues, hotter bricks, new mortars, yet the Arctic cold kept defeating his designs. Then, during a devastating downdraft winter, he discovered the breakthrough, a double flue chimney that used incoming cold air to supercharge the draft of the outgoing smoke. The more the windstorm raged outside, the cleaner the air became inside. The result was revolutionary. Homes stayed warm, the air stayed clear, and whole villages finally abandoned the smoke-blackened past. How did one builder turn a simple chimney into a self-reinforcing draft machine and reshape winter survival across the Arctic? Part 1. The year is 1715, specifically the month of October, a time of transition in the vast, snow-covered expanse of Russian Karelia, a region that stretches from the shores of Lake Ladoga in the west to the White Sea in the east, a land of endless forests, of frozen lakes, of bitter cold that can reach minus 45 degrees Celsius in the depths of winter. The old ways of the smokehouse, the Savupirti, are giving way to the new ways of the brick chimney, the Borov. The days are growing shorter, the nights longer. The first snows of October have already fallen, a white blanket that covers the land. In the small village of Korpiselka, a settlement of approximately 200 souls nestled on the eastern shores of Lake Ladoga, some 60 kilometers north of the town of Sortavala, a master builder named Dmitry Volkov is consumed by a single, all-encompassing obsession: to build a chimney that will not just vent smoke, but will do so with perfect efficiency, with unwavering reliability, with a grace and a beauty that will be a testament to the power of human ingenuity. At 45, Dmitry is a man of quiet strength, his hands calloused and gnarled from a lifetime of working with stone and clay, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by the sun and the wind. He is a man of few words, a man whose knowledge is not found in books, but in the feel of the stone, the texture of the clay, the subtle dance of heat and smoke. Dmitry is a man of vision, a man who sees not just what is, but what could be. He sees the chimney not as a simple hole in the roof, but as a living, breathing entity, a lung that can draw the smoke from a home, a heart that can bring warmth and comfort to a family. Born on May 10th, 1670, in the nearby village of Suoyarvi, Dmitry had learned the craft of stove building from his father, Master Ivan Volkov, who had learned it from his father before him. The art of stove construction had been passed down through 5 generations of his family, dating back to the early 16th century, when his ancestor, a builder named Alexei, had first experimented with building a brick flue in the attic of a log house. Dmitry has spent his life studying the chimney, learning its secrets, its quirks, its hidden potential. By the age of 20 in 1690, he had already built his first Russian stove for a nobleman's villa in Petrozavodsk. By the age of 30 in 1700, he had been commissioned to build a stove for a wing of the Alexander Nevsky Monastery. By the age of 40 in 1710, he had built over 30 stoves, from grand, ornate structures in the homes of the wealthy to simple, functional units in the humble izbas of the peasants. He has seen the chimney at its best, a source of clean, efficient heat that can keep a room warm even in the harshest of winters when the temperature outside plummets to minus 35 degrees Celsius. He has also seen it at its worst, a smoky, inefficient, and dangerous contraption that can fill a house with soot and carbon monoxide, causing headaches, nausea, and even death. The traditional smokehouse, or savupirti, as it was known in the Finnish language spoken by many in the region, which had been the dominant form of dwelling in Karelia for centuries, dating back to at least the 10th century, was a simple, straightforward design. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout Scandinavia and Russia had shown that these smokehouses had been in use since the Viking Age, from approximately 800 CE to 1050 CE, and had remained largely unchanged for over 700 years. A fire was lit in an open hearth, and the smoke was allowed to rise to the ceiling, where it would eventually find its way out through a small hole in the roof, the Lakastorvi. The ceiling was high, typically 3.5 to 4 meters, to keep the smoke above the living space. It was a clever, ingenious system, but it was far from perfect. The main problem was the smoke. The air in a smokehouse was always thick with the smell of burning wood, a smell that clung to the clothes, the furniture, the very skin of the inhabitants. The walls and ceiling were covered in a thick layer of soot, a black, greasy film that had to be scraped off periodically. The smoke was not just an inconvenience, it was a health hazard. It caused eye irritation, respiratory problems, and in some cases, even death. Dmitri believed that this was not just a matter of comfort, but of life and death. He believed that every family, from the wealthiest to the poorest, deserved to live in a home that was free of smoke. He was determined to find a way to build a chimney that would be so efficient, so reliable, that it would make the smokehouse a relic of the past. He was determined to build a chimney that would be a symbol of a new era, an era of clean air, of healthy living, of shared comfort for all. His obsession had begun in the winter of 1705, specifically on January 15th, when he had been called to the home of a wealthy merchant in the nearby town of Sortavala. The merchant's wife had just given birth to a baby boy, but the child was weak and sickly, his breathing shallow and labored. The house was a traditional smokehouse, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning birchwood. Dmitri had seen the suffering of the child, his tiny body struggling for every breath, his face pale and drawn. He had seen the despair in the eyes of the parents, their hopes for their newborn son slowly turning to ash. Dmitri had built a new stove for the merchant, a Russian stove with a brick chimney, the best he could build at the time, but it had not been enough. The chimney had not drawn properly, and the smoke had continued to leak into the room. The child had died on January 20th, 1705, just 5 days after Dmitri's arrival. The official cause of death was listed as fever, but Dmitri knew the truth. The smoke from the faulty chimney had contributed to the child's death. He had failed. He had failed to bring clean air to those who needed it most. He had, in fact, made their suffering worse. That failure had haunted him for years. It had become the driving force of his life, the fuel for his obsession. He had spent the past 10 years, from 1705 to 1715, experimenting with different designs, different materials, different techniques. He had built countless models, small-scale replicas of chimney systems in his workshop. He had tested different types of brick, different types of mortar, different flue designs. He had filled his notebooks with detailed drawings, with precise measurements, with meticulous observations. On July 3rd, 1708, he had discovered that the key to a perfect draft was not in the materials, but in the design of the flue. On August 15th, 1709, he had built his first experimental model with a straight, tall flue. On September 22, 1710, he had tested a flue with a cross-sectional area of 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. On November 8, 1711, he had experimented with refractory bricks from a kiln in Petrozavodsk. On February 14, 1712, he had tested a chimney in temperatures of -38 degrees Celsius. On April 20, 1713, he had built a model with a flue height of 6 meters. On June 5, 1714, he had tested different types of mortar mixtures. He had discovered that by creating a tall, straight, and well-insulated flue, he could create a powerful stack effect, a natural draft that would pull the smoke up and out of the house with unwavering efficiency. He had discovered that by carefully calculating the cross-sectional area of the flue, he could control the velocity of the smoke, ensuring that it would not be too fast, which would waste heat, or too slow, which would cause the smoke to linger in the room. But his ideas were radical, unconventional. They went against centuries of tradition of established practice. The other builders, the other masters of his craft, dismissed him as a dreamer, a fool, a man who was chasing an impossible dream. They were content with the old ways, with the tried and true methods that had been passed down from their ancestors. They were afraid of the new, the unknown, the untested. Even his own son, Alexei, born on March 2, 1695, now 20 years old, a young, ambitious builder who had been trained in the traditional ways, was skeptical. Alexei had apprenticed under his father from the age of 12, beginning on April 10, 1707, learning the craft of stove building through years of hard labor and patient observation. On July 18, 1708, he had mixed his first batch of mortar. On October 3, 1709, he had laid his first brick. On December 12, 1710, he had built his first small model stove. On March 25, 1711, he had assisted his father in building a stove for a merchant's home. On August 8, 1712, he had learned to calculate flue dimensions. By the age of 18, specifically on May 30, 1713, he had built his first Russian stove on his own, a simple, traditional design for a farmer's izba in the nearby village of Salmi. On September 15, 1713, he had built a second stove for a family in Impilakti. On December 20, 1713, he had completed a stove for a wealthy landowner. On February 28, 1714, he had built a stove for a monastery in Valam. By the age of 20, in 1715, he had been commissioned to build stoves for 3 different homes, earning a reputation as a skilled and reliable builder. But Alexei saw his father's obsession as a waste of time, a distraction from the real work of building stoves and earning a living. The family's income had declined significantly over the past 10 years, as Dmitri had turned down lucrative commissions to focus on his experiments. Alexei's wife, Anya, whom he had met on January 12, 1714, and married on June 1, 1714, was expecting their first child, due in the spring of 1716. Their courtship had been brief but passionate, with their engagement announced on March 18, 1714. The family needed money, not theories. Alexei urged his father to abandon his experiments, to return to the old ways, to accept the limitations of the chimney. On September 10, 1715, just 1 month before the first snows of winter, which had begun falling on October 8, 1715, Alexei had confronted his father in the workshop, his voice filled with frustration and anger. "Father, we are running out of money. We are running out of time. You are chasing a dream that will never come true. Please, for the sake of our family, for the sake of your grandson who will be born next year, please stop this madness." But Dmitri was not deterred. He was a man on a mission, a man with a vision. He was a man who believed that he could make a difference, that he could change the world, one chimney at a time. And now, As the first chill of winter began to settle over the village, he was ready to put his ideas to the test. He was ready to build a chimney that would not just vent smoke, but would do so with a quiet, unwavering efficiency. A chimney that would be a symbol of a new era, an era of clean air, of healthy living, of shared comfort for all. Part 2. The opportunity to prove his theories came in the form of a commission from a wealthy merchant named Ivan Petrov, a man who had made his fortune in the fur trade. Petrov was building a new home for his family, a grand two-story log house on the outskirts of the village. He had heard of Dmitri's reputation as a master builder, and he wanted the best, the most modern, the most efficient stove that money could buy. On October 1st, 1715, Petrov had summoned Dmitri to his office, a small, cluttered room filled with the smell of leather and wax. "I want a stove that will keep my family warm, that will not fill my house with smoke. That will be a testament to my success," Petrov had said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "I have heard that you are a man of vision, a man who is not afraid to challenge the old ways. I am willing to pay you a handsome sum, but I expect results. I expect a chimney that will be the envy of all my neighbors, a chimney that will be a symbol of my prosperity." Dmitri had accepted the commission without hesitation. This was his chance, his opportunity to prove that his ideas were not just the ramblings of a madman, but the product of years of careful research, of meticulous observation, of unwavering dedication. He spent the next 2 weeks, from October 2nd to October 15th, 1715, finalizing his design. He consulted his notebooks, which contained detailed observations dating back to his first experiments in 1705, including measurements of smoke velocity, temperature gradients, and draft calculations. The chimney would be tall, extending 2 meters above the roof line to create a powerful draft. Based on his calculations, a chimney of this height would generate a stack effect of approximately 15 pascals of pressure difference. The total height of the chimney, from the base of the stove to the top of the flue, would be 7 meters, making it one of the tallest chimneys in the region. The flue would be straight, with no bends or curves, to minimize friction and maximize airflow. The walls of the flue would be lined with a special type of refractory brick, a brick that had been fired at a high temperature to make it resistant to heat and cracking. The exterior of the chimney would be made of a special type of clay, a clay that had been mixed with sand and straw to make it strong and durable. On October 16, 1715, Dmitri and Alexei began the construction of the chimney. The work was hard, grueling, and physically demanding. They worked from sunrise to sunset, their bodies aching, their hands raw and blistered. They had to haul the heavy bricks and clay up to the roof, a task that required all of their strength and endurance. They had to mix the mortar, a precise and delicate process that required a careful balance of sand, clay, and water. They had to lay the bricks, one by one, with a precision and a care that was almost surgical. Alexei, despite his skepticism, worked with a quiet, grudging respect for his father's skill. He had never seen his father work with such intensity, with such focus, with such unwavering determination. He had never seen his father so consumed by a single project, so driven by a single vision. He began to see that his father was not just a builder, but an artist, a creator, a man who was trying to shape the world to his will. But the work was not without its challenges. The weather was a constant enemy, the wind a relentless foe. The cold was a constant companion, a numbing, bone-chilling presence that seeped into their clothes, their skin, their very bones. On October 25, 1715, a sudden snowstorm had swept through the village, a blinding, swirling blizzard that had forced them to abandon their work for 3 days. The snow had covered the chimney, a white frozen shroud that had threatened to undo all of their progress. But Dmitri was not discouraged. He was a man who had spent his life battling the elements, a man who knew that the only way to defeat the winter was to outsmart it, to outwit it, to outlast it. He had built a temporary shelter over the chimney, a simple makeshift structure of wood and canvas that had protected it from the snow and the wind. He had lit a small fire inside the shelter, a small flickering flame that had kept the mortar from freezing, that had kept the dream alive. By November 10th, 1715, the chimney was complete. It was a magnificent structure, a tall, elegant tower of brick and clay that rose from the roof of the house like a sentinel, a guardian, a symbol of a new era. It was a chimney that was not just functional but beautiful, a chimney that was a testament to the power of human ingenuity, a chimney that was a work of art. But the real test was yet to come. The chimney had to be fired, the stove had to be lit, the smoke had to be drawn. The moment of truth had arrived. On November 12th, 1715, Dmitri and Alexei stood in the main room of the house, their hearts pounding, their breath held in anticipation. The room was filled with the smell of fresh plaster and sawdust, the sound of the wind howling outside, the taste of the coming winter. The merchant, Ivan Petrov, stood beside them, his arms crossed, his face a mask of skepticism. Dmitri knelt before the stove, his hands trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, and then, with a steady hand, he lit a small piece of kindling. The flame flickered, then caught, then grew, a small bright beacon of hope in the dim, cold room. He placed the kindling in the stove, and then, slowly, carefully, he began to add more wood, larger pieces of birch and pine that had been seasoned for a year. The fire grew, a roaring, crackling inferno that filled the stove with a warm orange glow. The smoke began to rise, a thick black column that billowed from the fire. It rose to the top of the stove, and then, as if by magic, it was drawn into the flue, a silent, invisible current that pulled it up and out of the house. The room remained clear, the air clean, the smell of burning wood a faint, distant memory. The chimney was working. It was working perfectly. Dmitri looked at Alexei, a small, triumphant smile on his face. Alexei looked back at his father, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had seen it with his own eyes, but he could still not believe it. His father had done it. He had built a chimney that was not just a hole in the roof, but a living, breathing entity, a lung that could draw the smoke from a home, a heart that could bring warmth and comfort to a family. The merchant, Ivan Petrov, was speechless. He walked around the room, his eyes wide with wonder. He ran his hand over the smooth, warm surface of the stove. He breathed in the clean, fresh air. He looked at Dmitri, a look of grudging respect on his face. "You have done it, Volkov," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "You have built a chimney that is the envy of all my neighbors, a chimney that is a symbol of my prosperity. You are a true master of your craft." But Dmitri was not finished. He knew that the chimney was not just a symbol of prosperity, but a symbol of hope, a symbol of a new era, an era of clean air, of healthy living, of shared comfort for all. He knew that his work was not done, that his journey was just beginning. He knew that he had to share his knowledge, his vision, his passion with the world. He knew that he had to build more chimneys, more stoves, more symbols of a new era. He knew that he had to make the smokehouse a relic of the past, a forgotten memory of a darker, smokier time. Part 3. The news of Dmitri's success spread through the village like wildfire. By November 20th, 1715, word had reached the neighboring villages of Salmi, Impilahti, and Suistamo. By December 1st, 1715, builders from as far away as Petrozavodsk, the capital of the region, were making the journey to Korpiselka to see the miraculous chimney for themselves. By December 15th, 1715, Dmitri had received commissions from 5 different families, each one eager to have a chimney that would not fill their home with smoke. The other builders, the other masters of his craft, who had once dismissed him as a dreamer, a fool, a man who was chasing an impossible dream, now came to him with a newfound respect, a newfound curiosity. They wanted to know his secrets, his techniques, his hidden knowledge. They wanted to learn how to build a chimney that would not just vent smoke, but would do so with a quiet, unwavering efficiency, a chimney that would be a symbol of a new era. Dmitri, true to his vision, shared his knowledge freely, without hesitation, without reservation. He held workshops in his small, cluttered workshop, teaching the other builders the principles of his design, the secrets of his craft. He showed them how to build a tall, straight, and well-insulated flue, how to calculate the cross-sectional area of the flue, how to use refractory brick and special clay to create a chimney that was both strong and durable. He shared his notebooks, his drawings, his meticulous observations, his years of hard-won knowledge. By the spring of 1716, the village of Korpiselka was transformed. The old, smoky izbas were being replaced by new, modern homes with tall, elegant chimneys that rose from the roofs like sentinels, guardians, symbols of a new era. The air in the village was cleaner. The health of the villagers was better. The quality of life was higher. Dmitri had become a hero, a visionary, a man who had brought a new era of comfort and prosperity to his community. But his success was not without its challenges. The winter of 1716 was one of the harshest in living memory. The temperature plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius, and the snow fell in thick, heavy blankets that covered the land, a white, frozen shroud that threatened to undo all of their progress. The chimneys, which had worked so perfectly in the milder weather of the previous winter, now began to fail. The cold air was so dense, so heavy, that it was creating a reverse draft, a downdraft that was pushing the smoke back down the chimney and into the house. The villagers were in a panic. They had torn down their old, reliable smokehouses, and now they were left with new, modern chimneys that were filling their homes with smoke. They came to Dmitri, their faces filled with fear and anger. They accused him of being a fraud, a charlatan, a man who had sold them a false dream. They demanded that he fix the problem, that he find a way to make the chimneys work in the extreme cold. Dmitri was devastated. He had spent his life trying to bring clean air to his community, and now he was being accused of poisoning them. He had spent his life trying to build a better future, and now he was being accused of destroying their past. He had spent his life trying to be a hero, and now he was being treated like a villain. He retreated to his workshop, his heart heavy with a sense of failure, of despair, of hopelessness. He spent days and nights poring over his notebooks, his drawings, his meticulous observations, searching for an answer, a solution, a way to make the chimneys work in the extreme cold. He built new models, small-scale replicas of chimney systems in his workshop. He tested different designs, different materials, different techniques. He worked with a feverish intensity, a desperate urgency, a sense of a man who was running out of time. But the answer eluded him. The problem was not in the design of the chimney, but in the laws of physics, in the fundamental principles of heat and cold, of air pressure and density. The cold air was simply too heavy, too dense to be overcome by the natural draft of the chimney. It was a problem that seemed insurmountable, a challenge that seemed impossible, a puzzle that seemed unsolvable. He was on the verge of giving up, of admitting defeat, of accepting that his dream was just that, a dream, a fantasy, an impossible illusion. He was on the verge of telling the villagers that he had failed, that he had no answer, that they would have to go back to the old ways, to the smokehouse, to the dark, smoky past. But then, on the night of January 10th, 1717, as he sat in his workshop, his head in his hands, his heart heavy with despair, he had a vision. He saw a chimney that was not just a single flue, but a double flue, a chimney with two separate channels, one for the smoke and one for the fresh air. The fresh air channel would draw in cold air from the outside, and it would be heated by the smoke channel, creating a powerful updraft that would overcome the downdraft of the cold air. It was a simple, elegant solution, a solution that was so obvious, so logical, that he could not believe that he had not thought of it before. He worked through the night, his hands trembling with a newfound excitement, a newfound hope, a newfound sense of purpose. He built a new model, a small-scale replica of a double-flue chimney in his workshop. He tested it, and it worked. It worked perfectly. The double-flue design created a powerful updraft that was strong enough to overcome the downdraft of the cold air, even in the most extreme temperatures. He had found the answer. He had found the solution. He had found a way to make the chimneys work in the extreme cold. Part 4. The next morning, January 11th, 1717, Dmitri went to the home of Ivan Petrov, the wealthy merchant who had commissioned the first of his new chimneys. He explained his new design, his new vision, his new hope. Petrov, who had been one of his harshest critics, was skeptical. "You are asking me to tear down a perfectly good chimney and build a new one based on another one of your wild theories," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "I have already paid you a handsome sum for a chimney that does not work. Why should I trust you again?" Dmitri looked Petrov in the eye, his voice calm and steady. "Because I am not asking you to trust me," he said. "I am asking you to trust the laws of physics. I am asking you to trust the power of human ingenuity. I am asking you to trust the dream of a better future." Petrov was silent for a long moment. He looked at Dmitri, at the fire in his eyes, at the passion in his voice, at the unwavering conviction in his heart. He saw a man who was not just a builder, but a visionary, a creator, a man who was trying to shape the world to his will. He saw a man who was not just trying to build a chimney, but a man who was trying to build a better world. "Very well, Volkov," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "I will give you one more chance. But if this new chimney does not work, I will not only demand my money back, but I will see to it that you never build another chimney in this village again." Dmitri and Alexei worked with a feverish intensity, a desperate urgency, a sense of a team who was running out of time. They tore down the old chimney and built a new one, a double-flue chimney that was a testament to their newfound hope, their newfound vision, their newfound sense of purpose. They worked through the day and into the night, their bodies aching, their hands raw and blistered. They worked with a quiet, focused intensity, a sense of a team who was on the verge of a great discovery, a great breakthrough, a great victory. By the morning of January 15th, 1717, the new chimney was complete. It was a magnificent structure, a tall, elegant tower of brick and clay that rose from the roof of the house like a sentinel, a guardian, a symbol of a new era. It was a chimney that was not just functional, but beautiful, a chimney that was a testament to the power of human ingenuity, a chimney that was a work of art. But the real test was yet to come. The chimney had to be fired, the stove had to be lit, the smoke had to be drawn. The moment of truth had arrived. On the morning of January the 16th, 1717, Dmitri and Alexei stood in the main room of the house, their hearts pounding, their breath held in anticipation. The room was filled with the smell of fresh plaster and sawdust, the sound of the wind howling outside, the taste of the coming winter. The merchant, Ivan Petrov, stood beside them, his arms crossed, his face a mask of skepticism. Dmitri knelt before the stove, his hands trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, and then, with a steady hand, he lit a small piece of kindling. The flame flickered, then caught, then grew, a small, bright beacon of hope in the dim, cold room. He placed the kindling in the stove, and then, slowly, carefully, he began to add more wood, larger pieces of birch and pine that had been seasoned for a year. The fire grew, a roaring, crackling inferno that filled the stove with a warm orange glow. The smoke began to rise, a thick, black column that billowed from the fire. It rose to the top of the stove, and then, as if by magic, it was drawn into the flue, a silent, invisible current that pulled it up and out of the house. The room remained clear, the air clean, the smell of burning wood a faint, distant memory. The chimney was working. It was working perfectly. Dmitri looked at Alexei, a small, triumphant smile on his face. Alexei looked back at his father, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had seen it with his own eyes, but he could still not believe it. His father had done it. He had built a chimney that was not just a hole in the roof, but a living, breathing entity, a lung that could draw the smoke from a home, a heart that could bring warmth and comfort to a family. The merchant, Ivan Petrov, was speechless. He walked around the room, his eyes wide with wonder. He ran his hand over the smooth, warm surface of the stove. He breathed in the clean, fresh air. He looked at Dmitri, a look of grudging respect on his face. "You have done it, Volkov," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "You have built a chimney that is the envy of all my neighbors, a chimney that is a symbol of my prosperity. You are a true master of your craft." But Dmitri was not finished. He knew that the chimney was not just a symbol of prosperity, but a symbol of hope, a symbol of a new era, an era of clean air, of healthy living, of shared comfort for all. He knew that his work was not done, that his journey was just beginning. He knew that he had to share his knowledge, his vision, his passion with the world. He knew that he had to build more chimneys, more stoves, more symbols of a new era. He knew that he had to make the smokehouse a relic of the past, a forgotten memory of a darker, smokier time. Part 5. The double flue chimney became the new standard in Korpiselka, and soon in all of Russian Karelia. By the spring of 1718, over 50 homes in the village had been fitted with the new chimneys. By the summer of 1720, over 200 homes throughout the region had adopted the design. By the winter of 1725, the double flue chimney had become the standard for all new construction in Russian Karelia, and the old smokehouses were being torn down and replaced at a rapid pace. Dmitri Volkov became a legend, a man who had single-handedly transformed the lives of his community, a man who had brought a new era of comfort and prosperity to his people. He spent the rest of his life, from 1717 to his death on March 10, 1750, at the age of 80, traveling throughout Karelia, teaching his methods, sharing his knowledge, spreading his vision. He built hundreds of chimneys, each one a testament to his skill, his passion, his unwavering dedication. He became known as the father of the modern chimney, a title that he wore with a quiet, humble pride. Alexei, who had once been his father's harshest critic, became his most devoted disciple. He worked alongside his father for 33 years, from 1717 to 1750, learning his secrets, his techniques, his hidden knowledge. He became a master builder in his own right, a man who was respected and admired for his skill, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to his craft. After his father's death, Alexei continued his work, building hundreds of chimneys, each one a tribute to his father's legacy, his father's vision, his father's dream. The double flue chimney, the Santa-style chimney, as it came to be known, became a symbol of the Russian winter, a symbol of warmth, of comfort, of home. It was a chimney that was not just a hole in the roof, but a living, breathing entity, a lung that could draw the smoke from a home, a heart that could bring warmth and comfort to a family. It was a chimney that was a testament to the power of human ingenuity, a chimney that was a work of art. And so, the legacy of Dmitry Volkov, the master builder of Korpiselka, lived on, not just in the tall, elegant chimneys that dotted the landscape of Russian Karelia, but in the clean air, the healthy living, the shared comfort of the people who lived in their warm, smoke-free homes. In the year 1825, specifically on June 12, 1825, a young architect from St. Petersburg, a man named Nikolai Petrov, born on April 5, 1800, the grandson of the merchant Ivan Petrov, visited the village of Korpiselka. He had heard the stories of the master builder Dmitry Volkov, and he wanted to see his work for himself. He was amazed by what he saw. He arrived on June 12, 1825, and stayed until July 15, 1825, spending a month in the village, studying the chimneys, learning their secrets, their techniques, their hidden knowledge. On June 20, 1825, he measured the dimensions of 12 different chimneys. On June 28, 1825, he interviewed Alexei Volkov, who was then 70 years old. On July 5, 1825, he sketched detailed cross-sections of the double flue design. On July 10, 1825, he tested the draft in various weather conditions. He filled his notebooks with detailed drawings, with precise measurements, with meticulous observations. He returned to St. Petersburg on July 20, 1825, and spent the next 2 years writing his manuscript. On September 1, 1826, he submitted his manuscript to the Imperial Academy of Sciences. On November 15, 1826, the manuscript was accepted for publication. On March 1, 1827, the book was published under the title The Architecture of the North, a book that celebrated the work of Dmitry Volkov, a book that brought his legacy to the world. The book was a sensation, a bestseller, a classic of architectural literature. It was translated into a dozen languages, and it inspired a new generation of architects, of builders, of dreamers. The double flue chimney, the Santa-style chimney, became a standard feature of homes throughout the world, a symbol of warmth, of comfort, of home. And so, the legacy of Dmitry Volkov, the master builder of Korpiselka, lived on, not just in the tall, elegant chimneys that dotted the landscape of the world, but in the clean air, the healthy living, the shared comfort of the people who lived in their warm, smoke-free homes. It was a legacy of hope, of vision, of passion, a legacy that had been forged in the fire of a single, all-encompassing obsession, a legacy that had been built, one brick at a time, by a man who had dared to dream of a better world.